So the next speakers are Troy Weekes, who's a doctoral research assistant at the Department of Computer Science at Harris Institute for Assured Information at Florida State Institute of Technology, and Thomas Eskridge, who is a PhD student at the Department of Human-Centered Design at the same university. So I don't know if both of you will be presenting, or just Troy, maybe. Great. So I'm going to leave the podium to you. You can take it from there.
Thank you very much for your introduction, Pierre. I'm going to go ahead and get the presentation started. Personal flow and effortless attention in knowledge work using active inference. Hi everyone, my name is Troy Weekes. I'm a PhD student and I'm under the supervision of Dr. Thomas Eskridge, who is here in the audience. Today I'm going to be presenting on a topic that is at the core of my PhD research. I'll be looking at personal flow and effortless attention. But after providing you a background in those areas, I will seek to describe the methods that we use in this study, namely survey, modeling, simulation, and then I will summarize the results that we've obtained from the survey, which was used to generate priors for simulating our model. And then we'll look at the analysis of the simulation results on a visual search task. And then I will conclude with the promising opportunities that this research has provided us, as well as speak about future directions for our work. Before getting started, I wish to acknowledge sponsors, L3 Harris Institute for Assured Information and the Diverse Intelligences Summer Institute. Thank them for their continued support on this project. This particular research fits into a wider project that is designed to enhance the work of knowledge workers by increasing their cognitive well-being and the amount of time that they spend in the high performance flow state. So when we look at knowledge workers, there are about over 1 billion of them throughout the world, and almost 50% of the workforce in the United States are knowledge workers. These are persons who perform non-routine cognitive jobs that require significant amount of concentration and creativity in order to achieve the outcomes. Knowledge work also requires uninterrupted work. And when knowledge work is conducted successfully, knowledge workers generally report feelings of flow, which is engaging, challenging experiences with their work that are also enjoyable in nature. Some examples of knowledge workers on the job. For example, we have process control engineers who may be monitoring systems within a nuclear plant, air traffic controllers who are tracking aircraft targets on a radar screen, lawyers who are searching contracts and legal documents for references and loopholes, or even business analysts who are looking for the next game-changing investment to make. All of these knowledge workers have something in common with their specific work tasks. And that is that their work is made up of demanding visual search. For example, this figure on the left shows some initial global scan path patterns that are used by air traffic controllers in a moderate congestion scenario at an airport. And what is noticed is that air traffic controllers, they generally take more time to detect aircraft conflicts, which are the targets that they're looking for, as the congestion level increases. So once the number of targets on the screen increases, which is called the set size, we find that air traffic controllers take more time They're visual scan paths. They're generally circular scan paths, or they can be linear scan paths. And the complexity of the scene that they're scanning can influence the method that they choose to perform the scan with. In terms of attention, we have a significant body of research that outlines attention as a limited executive resource that can be increased by focusing and concentrating on a specific task. However, attention itself has a cost, and this cost is generally associated with cognitive effort. Treisman and Gelati, they proposed a feature integration theory of attention, which explained how attention shifts according to the complexity of the scene. And they noticed that when there's simple scenes to scan, there's an automatic and parallel registration of the features within the scene. Whereas once the scene gets a bit more complex and there are combinations and conjunctions of features, the task becomes a bit more focused. It requires more focused attention, and it becomes a serial process to identify the objects in the scene. Therefore, more attention is required. And we also see that in context of active inference, some attentional states are internal within the human brain, and they allow the human agent to control what they're attending to. And we'll get into this as we expand into the theories of attention. However, to take a look at the visual search tasks and the complexity that is involved, we have on the left the single feature search, where we are looking for the red circle, and this particular task is very simple because that red circle pops out with a single feature search. However, in the conjunction search in the middle, where we may be looking for, let's say, the red circle, now that we have a conjunction of features, namely color and shape, it becomes a bit more challenging to identify the specified target. Whereas on the right-hand side with the configuration search, this particular type of search has increasing complexity because the similarity between the various distractors and targets is very high. And therefore, it will be very challenging for us to detect the T, which is the target that we are interested in this particular search. Now, in terms of how knowledge workers perform their work, they're generally foraging their work tasks, looking for flow, trying to build momentum, and trying to achieve successful outcomes. And this is where the theory of personal flow, which was proposed by Csikszentmihalyi, which has a number of components that were tested and verified in his research, as well as follow-up research, where these components can be categorized in antecedents, which are factors that precede the, as behaviors, which take place during the state of flow, and then consequences, or effects or outcomes that are usually reported after the state of flow. This organization of factors helps to explain what happens when a person engages with knowledge work as they're seeking flow. What is going to be of particular importance for us in this particular presentation will be the notion that there is a skill balanced with the challenge or the demand of the task. This is one of the prerequisites for flow. Another is the autotelic personality of the person, which is like how your propensity to enter into the state of flow and how frequently they actually experience the state of flow. These are going to be important because they affect the priors that we're going to be using in our simulation model. Another important thing to know is the association or correlation between personal flow and attention. As the knowledge worker moves from a state of divided attention, where they may be doing multiple things, as is hinted by this image, the person may be on social media prior to engaging with their knowledge work, but their attention is divided. And in the context of flow, they're actually distracted. Now, let's say that the knowledge worker begins to start the project that they're working on, but the phone rings and they continue to alternate their attention between the task and the phone. Then that's the alternating attention. They're still relatively distracted. However, once the person begins to select the task that they are interested in and they have their goals clearly identified, they now begin to enter into a state of selective attention. And this is going to lead them, hopefully, towards a state of pre-flow. As the knowledge worker continues to focus their attention on the task and block out the distractions around them, their probability of entering into the state of flow is significantly increased. Until they reach this threshold, after sustaining this focused attention for a bit of time, they begin to enter into the state of effortless attention, which is now when they're paying full attention to the task. They're not worried about their internal state, meaning whether or not they're hungry, or if they have something else to do later in the day. It's all attention on the task. And this frees up some of the cognitive resources, which we're suggesting makes this particular state of attention effortless. Now, in terms of active inference, what we're looking at is the Markov blanket, which is established by the sensory states and the active states, which protect the internal states of the agent from direct interaction with the external states in the environment. The generative process in the environment causes these external states that become observable to the human agent. And the observer uses an internal generative model in order to predict the incoming sensory data that is to be perceived. The observer, after processing that information, makes an action, but in order to minimize surprise in the future, as well as to minimize variational free energy. And these actions change the world or change the external states of the environment, and the system becomes updated. So here's another look at the blanket, here denoted by B, which contains these sensory states in green, as well as these active states in blue. And the internal states are represented by this mu in the center. The eta external states are impacting on this agent, but notice it's indirectly via those sensory states. Now, the flow of interactions into these sensory states eventually makes its way across the blanket and into the internal states, where that effect is felt, and then some action is proposed by the active states in order to make an effect on the external states. Now, in our model of flow, what we're looking at is the human agent, where the demand of stimulus makes up the external states. Okay, And the skill of the human agent encapsulates the sensory states. So here we are seeing the balance again, or the need for a balance between the demand and the skill, or the challenge and the skill, which is one of those prerequisites for the flow state. Now, performance makes up the active state of the human agent. And all of the other states that we see here in purple constitute the internal states of the human agent. Now, context is some relevant side information that has an influence on the model. And in our specific simulation, we're going to have these two variables, the flow propensity and the flow emotion, which are two variables that we would have sampled from our knowledge workers in the survey that we are using for priors to get this model going. So we are looking at context, but not all of the variables of context, only propensity and flow emotion, which we'll see in a couple seconds. So the methodology that we chose, and as I hinted at earlier, comprises of a survey, which is followed by some modeling and simulation, and then we perform an evaluation of the results from the simulation. The survey of the knowledge workers, we partitioned all of our knowledge workers into 4 groups. The first question that we asked all of the knowledge workers was, how frequently do you experience this state of flow during knowledge work? And if the person said anything greater than sometimes, then we put them over into groups C or D. And if they said anything less than or equal to sometimes, they became part of group A or group B. But what differentiates between group A and B is the second question, which is, how do you feel when you experience the state of flow? If the participants indicated that they felt happy, then they were placed in group B. And if they were not happy, then they were placed in group A. However, of the other participants who had answered that they experienced flow more than sometimes, we did the same partition on the second question, which is, how do they feel when they experience a state of flow? And those who said that they felt happy, we put them in group D. And those who said that they did not feel happy, we put them in group C. So this allowed us to partition our data set into 4 distinct groups based on these 2 questions. The flow propensity, which is how frequent, and then the flow emotion, which is how do you feel when you're in the state of flow. And we also formulated this task, which is a visual search task. Here we have a rule, which is to find this red Y, this red upright Y. And then we have a number of distractors in the screen. Some are upside down red Ys, some are upside down or upright green Ys. And then the target is right here, which is the only red upright Y. Now, the task can be performed by the agent searching for a target, and if target is found, then the agent will click on the target. If the agent searches for the target and becomes exhausted, not finding the target, then they have the opportunity to either continue searching or to click the target not found button, which would indicate that they quit. Sometimes the target can be present in the scene, or sometimes the target can be absent from the scene. So in the case where the target is absent and the participant has spent a considerable amount of time looking for the target, they may want to go ahead and press this target not found button if they don't find it. So here is how the process goes. We start off with a fixation cross, and then the task proceeds. After 1 second or 1,000 milliseconds, then the actual task stimulus is presented. with targets and distractors or without a target. The observer, knowledge worker, is supposed to perform saccades and fixations across the scene, searching for the target until they actually find the target, whether it's present or not. They will click on the target or click on the button target not found. In this specific case, the target is not present. Actually, there's a target. Here it is. And therefore, the participant will click on this target. And that's the way how the target, the visual search task works. Now, here is an example of the agent performing the scan. And you can see that the agent started off here at the fixation point in the center. And then they moved in this linear fashion across, searching for the target. Now, this is only 10 fixations. Sorry, this is only 5 fixations here, not counting the initial fixation. But the actual simulation ran with hundreds of fixations in order for the agent to find the target. So in order to model the agent performing these strategies, we had to come up with different ways of scanning the scene. For group A, which is again the low flow, not happy group, we allowed them to use a random scan strategy. We gave group B a linear scanning strategy. Group D, they moved in a quadrant-oriented manner, so more like a circular type approach, quadrant. And then group D, sorry, this is the type of group C here. Group D is based on a belief strategy. So group D actually uses the Markov decision process in order to update its belief about the task stimulus. And this particular agent uses some level of active inferencing in order to update those beliefs over time. Then we have some probabilities for clicking that target not found button. And this distribution here was presented again to simulate these particular agents and the characteristics thereof: happy or flow, high flow, low flow. Now, this is the specific partially observable Markov decision process model that was used in order to complete the perception action cycle within this research. And particularly, we are looking at the fact that based on the expected free energy, the highest probability will be assigned to those policies that minimize uncertainty over states and maximize the probability of achieving the preferred outcomes, which would be to find the target or to click on the target not found button if the target is absent from the scene. So to simulate this process, we created 4 groups of knowledge workers. Those are the groups A, B, C, and D. For each group, we generated 500 knowledge workers. So there were 2,000 knowledge worker agents in total performing the simulation. For the actual task stimulus, we introduced the number of distractors and target in the scene to call it a set. And we varied the set size from 5 to 10 to 25, 50, and 100. And this difference or this increase in set size is supposed to simulate increasing complexity and challenge or demand within the task stimulus. For each knowledge worker, we allow them to run 30 trials at each set size level, therefore allowing each knowledge worker to run a total of 150 trials across the set sizes. Then we plotted response time over set size for all of the groups. When the target was present, we did the similar plot for when the target was absent. So we want response time on the vertical axis, set size on the horizontal axis for two conditions: when the target is present and when the target is absent. And the third plot is to plot the uncertainty over the saccades and fixations of a trial for each of the knowledge work groups. And this time we fixed the set size at 25, which is the mid-level, and we observe how certainty was decreasing or changing rather as the trial progressed. For our evaluation and looking at these three plots, for the first plot, we're interested in finding out if response time increases with set size across the groups. So as the complexity of the scene increases, do we see that corresponding increase in response time? And does it increase more or less for some groups? Likewise, for when the target is absent, do we see similar patterns and increases with the response times? And then for the uncertainty, we want to see which group of knowledge workers demonstrate that notion of minimizing uncertainty, minimizing free energy as they perform the task. So this was the distribution from the survey after we had a total of 468 participants, and this is the distribution, which was relatively skewed towards happy high flow people, almost twice as much in that group compared to the other groups, but the other groups are relatively equal in size. Now, in terms of taking a look at effort and attention across the different knowledge work stages, again, this is results from the survey that we're going to be using as priors to frame the model. What we've noticed here is that looking at effort across the top, this is effort for group A, effort for group B, C, and D. Across the top, we see quickly that for groups C and D, they have more effort than groups A and B. Likewise, for concentration, which are the four plots across the bottom, we see again that groups C and D exhibit more attention, or they report more attention across the knowledge work stages. So in other words, these high flow knowledge workers claim to perform more effortful and more attentive knowledge work than their low flow counterparts. Another observation that we were looking for is when looking at effort and attention within the groups, we were looking to see if there's a situation where the attention curve is going to be above the effort curve, which is going to be synonymous with our hypothesis of effortless attention. But this data is inconclusive in regard to that hypothesis. So we will continue our investigation, maybe reformulate and take a different look. Now, in terms of looking at the four agents or the four groups of agents performing the knowledge work trials, here we are seeing that for the situation where the target is present, which is this one, across the trials, we're seeing that there's a general increase in response times as we go from a set size of 0 across all the way up to set size of 100. Response times are generally increasing. For group A, which is the red curve, this is the random curve, which kind of behaves a little different compared to all of the other non-random groups, which again are exhibiting that positive gradient as expected from the research. In the situation where the target was absent, we do not notice any significant gradient across the set size. But what is noticeable across both graphs when the target is absent and when the target is present is that group D, which is the orange curve, always has lower response times compared to the other agents. And this is we postulate is due to the fact that group D has a belief-based uncertainty reducing policy that it is using in order to perform these saccades and fixations across the visual scene. And the last plot that we were taking a look at is the uncertainty. How does uncertainty change for these different groups across the actual trial? And here we can see that once we go over 100 saccades, we're seeing that, again, the group D, which is denoted by the orange line, the rate at which uncertainty in the stimulus is decreasing is much faster than the other types of agents. And therefore, we conclude from this one that group D type agent, again, is benefiting from that belief update that allows it to reduce uncertainty in its belief over time. So to conclude, we found that active inference provides a toolkit that can be used to study flow in a scientific manner, where we can model different types of agents, put them into different contexts, and observe the effects. We also see that the conditions that cause free energy to fluctuate during deep concentrated effort may become indicators of flow state transitions. And this is what we're going off in our broader research project, which is seeking to enhance the lives of knowledge workers. If we can identify what causes transitions in flow state, then we might be able to design a choice architecture for these knowledge workers that can allow them to enhance their cognitive well-being, as well as to maximize the amount of time that they spend in the flow state. We also found that results from this simulated conjunction configuration visual search task the results are consistent with results from laboratory studies. And this leads us to the next point, which is our future work. We will be focusing on taking this particular visual search task into the lab with real humans and collecting behavioral and neural biodata to be able to verify and test the model that we've created. So that concludes our presentation. I'd like to thank you for your attention, and now I open the floor for any questions that you may have.
Hiya, thank you for the talk. It's always an interesting topic, flow. I'm a bit distracted, so sorry if I just missed it. But I was curious, like when you at the part where they have different strategies for the visual search, was that just you just decided that, or how did that come to be? Was it already differentiated per strategy, or were you just giving them the strategies per group? What was the rationale behind that?
Right, thank you for your question. So the strategies that we used for groups A, B, C, and D are compatible with the strategies that were identified with the visual search of the air traffic controller at the beginning, where we were seeing that in some prior research, air traffic controllers, when they're performing an initial scan of their radar screens, depending on the complexity, they would choose a specific scan path. And those scan paths would either be linear scan paths, circular scan paths, mixtures of those scan paths. And what we decided to do was to create a naive agent, which was group A type agent, which was just random, he goes all over the place. Group B was a more linear type guy, he performs linear traversals, linear saccades. Group C, we endowed that agent with the ability to go around circular and quadrant style. And then group D, this was the agent that we were using to model the active inference component, which is why we gave that one a belief map of the entire visual scene, and the task of that group D agent was to update its belief in order to minimize uncertainty as it traversed the scene. So that's how those features were assigned to the agents.
So I'm just still a bit confused, but so did you assign them based on like you said you saw these flight patterns at the what's it called, flight attendant, Jesus, what's it called, the flight controller, sorry. Yeah, so were the particular strategies also associated with, for example, high and low flow or just complexity? Because the groups were organized based on their flow propensity and flow emotion, right? But the flight visual search strategy for the flight controllers, that was related to complexity, right? Or was that just random?
Yeah, those strategies, and it also depends on the experience level of the actual air traffic controller in terms of the preference of scan strategy that they would use. But the whole notion of it is that the participants who are going to be more likely to get into flow, they would have a more optimal, or rather a better, they would have a better scanning strategy than the low flow agents. And that's like a general concept. People who tend to experience flow in their work usually have some strategy, some extra knowledge that allows them to do that. And this is kind of how we were differentiating the agent D.
Ah, okay. Okay, thank you.
Yes, I still have the question. Troy, are you familiar with Wu-Wei?
Can you please repeat? Am I familiar with?
Are you familiar with the concept of Wu-Wei? Effortless action is in Chinese, at least in Chinese.
No, I'm not familiar with that concept.
Okay, so there is a recent book by Slingerland that discusses it, and the core idea that apparently, according to him, the ancient Chinese philosopher like Lao Tzu and Confucius had, is that basically you cannot be actually focused and efficient on something if your mind is on the end result. You can only work well if you detach yourself from the outcome and only focus on the process. And you have pretty well-known accounts of master workers that basically say it's sculptor, I don't know what you say in English. It's people who have a carver, and they see the wood and they see the carving within the wood, and they only enact what they see in the wood. And there is at no point of the process something like an intention or will that is enacted on the world. Do you see this interacting with what you know of flow and active inference?
Okay, what I gather from your point is that when a person is entering into the state of flow, their limited attentional bandwidth, part of it may be focused on the task, but another part of their attention may be focused on maybe internal feelings, maybe on the temperature of the room, other external things. But it's not on the task. What happens is that as a person goes into that state of flow, their attention diverts from those other sources and becomes more focused on the task at hand. And that to me is what allows the person to be able to, let's say, obtain more information about the task per unit time, and therefore enter into that that state of flow. However, when a person is in flow and some distraction occurs outside in the external world, or let's say inside of the body of that person, then they can become interrupted. They get the distraction, they become interrupted, and now their flow is broken. They have to recover and rebuild that flow. So I don't know if that is close to what you just said, but to me that's the way how attention fluctuates in flow.
Okay, so what I meant to point at is the role of intention and actually the nature of intention in flow, a state of flow, because what is critically entailed by the notion of Wu Wei is that someone which is in a flow-like state, because I do not conceptualize flow, is someone that is detached from the result. They do not have the intention, they just have a way of engaging with the world, and this way happens to have an outcome that is judged positive. But the outcome is entirely outside the mind of the agent. Is this something that you see reflecting in your work?
Right, so what I can say is that, remember when I put up the 9 components of flow, one of the first ones on that list was about the goals of the work task being very clear. And to me, if the goals of the task are clear from the inception, what's going to happen is that, again, the bandwidth that the person has to pay to that particular part of the task, which is to understand the goals, their intention, what their outcomes are that they're going after. Once they have clear and proximal goals, they can free up that bandwidth and allow more focus to be had on the specifics in the immediate task. So again, I think it is all about how do we take our attentional resources and focus them not on extraneous or alternate sources, but to focus as much attention as possible onto the task and the immediate parts of the task. That's why immediate feedback is also one of the central focuses here of flow. So again, I don't know how the long-term goals, outcomes, and intentions can have an impact other than consuming attention.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? I don't see any hands or anyone moving. Mel?
Yes, I had a question. You seem to mention knowledge workers as though this was a very specific class. And when listening to your notions, it seemed that one, flow is a state which seems to arise in a variety of areas, including just learning art, or any sort of job which requires being at the edge of potentiation / epistemic value being integrated into someone's model. So I guess my question is, does your model explicitly only apply to what you qualified as knowledge worker, or is it actually a very broad model which you chose to focus on knowledge worker just because it allowed you to do interesting simulations?
Yeah, so my aim with going for knowledge workers was to get that broad perspective. And again, when I defined knowledge workers early up, I tried to keep it broad by identifying that as persons who are performing these non-routine jobs that require concentration, creativity, and no interruptions. Okay, so this now can mean that the musician who is composing the next piece, he's definitely he or she's definitely a knowledge worker, just as much as the architect who is building a new mall. So the idea here with this model is to be able to even incorporate persons who we don't consider as knowledge workers, but who still experience flow considerably. For example, athletes. Athletes are other persons who interact with some pretty complex tasks, but they usually report, or a lot of them report entering into the state of flow. So the model that we have here is we're trying to make it as general as possible to be able to apply to different types of knowledge workers and potentially different types of workers outside of knowledge workers.
I think she was satisfied with the question, with the answer. Any more questions? If there are none, I will thank Troy and for his presentation, for a great presentation.